You're walking through a city, surrounded by flashing screens, glossy advertisements, and perfect images of happy people selling you cars, perfumes, and dreams. You might think these things reflect reality. A better version of it? Maybe. But what if they don't? What if they have replaced reality altogether? Jean Baudrillard, a French thinker, said this is exactly what's happening in his mysterious and mind-bending work, Simulacra and Simulation. He explained how our modern world doesn't just show us reality, it creates a fake one. Something he called hyper-reality. And here's the wild part. We can't even tell the difference anymore. It starts with symbols. Let's say you see a picture of a hamburger on a billboard. It looks juicy, perfect, irresistible. But that picture isn't a real burger. It's an idea of a burger made to sell you something. The real burger you get at the fast food counter will never look like that picture. The image is fake, but it's powerful. Over time, we start wanting the fake version, the perfect version, more than the real thing. Now take this idea and stretch it out. Everything around you, TV shows, social media, brands, they all build this shiny, polished version of reality. And here's the scary part. They start to replace the real world. You don't just watch a romance movie, you start to believe love has to look like that. You don't just see a politician's speech, you see the performance, the image they want you to believe in. The simulation becomes your truth. Baudrillard said this goes so far that reality fades away. The fake symbols and images don't point to something real anymore. They just point to other fake things. It's like being trapped in a hall of mirrors. Everywhere you look, you see reflections. But there's no original behind them. This is hyper-reality, a world where the line between real and fake is gone. But the scary thing is that Baudrillard didn't think this was just a glitch in the system. He believed it was the system. Society is built on these illusions now, and we are living inside them, like characters in a movie we can't step out of. The creators of The Matrix were inspired by this idea. In the film, The Matrix is a perfect example of hyper-reality, a world so convincing that the people inside it believe it's real. Baudrillard's message was both a warning and a mystery. If we've lost touch with the real world, how would we even know? And if we wanted to escape, where would we go? Imagine this. You wake up one day and start questioning everything. What if the world around you, the walls, the trees, the sun and the sky, isn't real? What if the people you talk to are just illusions? And worse, what if your own memories and thoughts are being tampered with by some sinister force? This is exactly the kind of dark, mind-twisting question René Descartes, a philosopher from centuries ago, dared to ask. He thought, what if there's an evil demon, a powerful, clever trickster who spent its existence deceiving me? What if it's feeding me false images, sounds, and even ideas, so that nothing I experience is real? Of course, Descartes didn't say this demon actually existed, but he used it as a thought experiment to challenge everything he believed. Think about it. How do you know you're not dreaming right now, or hooked up to some machine that feeds fake signals into your brain? For Descartes, even the most basic truths, like math, could be suspect. What if the demon was so powerful it could make 2 + 2 feel like 4, when in reality, it wasn't? The twist is, Descartes realized that, while this demon could fool him about almost everything, there was one thing it couldn't touch. The fact that he was thinking these thoughts, even doubting everything, was proof that he existed. Why? Because to doubt, you need to think. And if you're thinking, you exist. He summed this up with the famous line, I think, therefore I am. It was like Descartes built a small, unshakable island of certainty in a sea of doubt. From there, he began rebuilding his understanding of the world. If he could trust his own existence, maybe he could figure out what else was real, step by step. The evil demon wasn't the villain of Descartes' story, it was the key to unlocking his philosophy. By imagining the worst kind of deception, he found a way to uncover a truth so solid, nothing could destroy it. It's a reminder that sometimes, when we question everything, we find answers that are stronger than doubt. Imagine you're stuck in a dark cave, chained to the ground. You can't move, can't turn your head, and all you can see is the wall in front of you. Behind you, there are people and things you can't see, but they're casting shadows on the wall. You've been there for as long as you can remember. And these shadows are the only reality you know. They move and flicker, and you start to believe that they are all there is, that they are real. Now one day something crazy happens. One of the prisoners is freed. At first they're confused, hurt, and blinded by the sunlight outside the cave. Everything feels strange and overwhelming, but as their eyes adjust, they begin to see a whole new world. The sun, trees, animals, and real shapes, not just blurry shadows. Excited by this new world, the freed prisoner rushes back into the cave to tell the others what they've seen. But when they hear about it, the others don't believe them. They can't imagine anything beyond the shadows they've always known. They laugh at the freed prisoner and say, "You're crazy. The shadows are all that exist. The world outside is just too hard to believe." What does this story mean? Well, in Allegory of the Cave, Plato was trying to show that sometimes we're trapped in our own version of reality, only seeing what we're told to see. The shadows on the wall represent the lies, or false beliefs we accept, because they're the only things we know. But there's a whole bigger truth out there, if we're willing to look beyond what we're used to and challenge what we believe. It's like being stuck in a dream, only to wake up and realize that there's so much more to life than you ever imagined. But waking up isn't easy. It's painful, confusing, and sometimes people would rather stay in the dream than face the overwhelming truth. Escape from Freedom by Erich Fromm dives deep into a fascinating question. Is there a hidden satisfaction in giving up our freedom? And if so, what's at its core? Throughout history, humanity has fought tirelessly for freedom. We conquered nature, broke free from religious dogma, and many even believe that after World War I, the battle for freedom was finally won. Yet, as personal freedom became more accessible, something strange happened. Within a few years, totalitarian systems emerged, denying people the very liberties they had fought so hard for. Some people ran from this newfound freedom, seeking refuge and submission, while others didn't even see the point of protecting their independence. Fromm's book explores the psychological and societal forces shaping modern individuals and seeks to understand why so many people willingly escape personal freedom. They do this in one of two ways: by submitting to a powerful leader, or by compulsively conforming to societal expectations, becoming like robots. In older societies, identity and purpose were simpler. You were born into a community with a clear role. Maybe your family were shoemakers, and you would naturally follow in their footsteps. Life lacked choices, but it offered belonging. With capitalism, however, everything changed. Suddenly, everyone was in competition, and self-worth was tied to how useful you were in the marketplace. Capitalism freed individuals, but also amplified feelings of isolation and uncertainty. In this system, even emotions like friendliness became commodities. Children learned to suppress their genuine feelings, and instead display socially acceptable ones, like smiling on command. Over time, these pseudo-feelings blur with real ones, leaving people disconnected from their true selves. Only those at society's extremes, the very rich or very poor, escape the pressure to always be pleasant, and perhaps that's why their unapologetic freedom often provokes envy or irritation. So, are we doomed to feel isolated and powerless, giving up our individuality to either follow a leader or blend into the crowd? Fromm argues there's a better way. The solution lies in building genuine relationships with others and with nature, embracing spontaneity, love, and meaningful work. This path requires self-realization, accepting yourself fully and authentically. Fromm also links economic hardship to the rise of authoritarianism. Inflation, like in 1920s Germany or the 1929 US crash, crushed people's hope in their ability to create better lives. This insecurity made them vulnerable to totalitarian ideologies. With today's rising inflation rates worldwide, Fromm's warnings feel eerily relevant. This book opens your eyes to the psychological flaws of modern society and how it fails to meet basic human needs like belonging, community, and purpose. When you find human society disagreeable and feel yourself justified in flying to solitude, you can be so constituted as to be unable to bear the depression of it for any length of time, which will probably be the case if you are young. In Essays and Aphorisms, Arthur Schopenhauer advised you to form the habit of taking some of your solitude with you into society. To learn to be to some extent alone even though you are in company, not to say at once what you think, and, on the other hand, not to attach too precise a meaning to what others say, rather, not to expect much of them, either morally or intellectually, and to strengthen yourself in the feeling of indifference to their opinion, which is the surest way of always practicing a praiseworthy toleration. If you do that, you will not live so much with other people, though you may appear to move amongst them. Your relation to them will be of a purely objective character. This precaution will keep you from too close contact with society, and therefore secure you against being contaminated, or even outraged by it. Society is in this respect like a fire, the wise man warming himself at a proper distance from it, not coming too close like the fool who, on getting scorched, runs away and shivers in solitude, loud in his complaint that the fire burns. Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote The Social Contract in 1762. During a time of big changes in France, people were starting to question the power of kings, the church, and traditional authority. As the world shifted from feudal systems to more global and commercial societies, Rousseau opens the book with a famous line: "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." This reflects his belief that society limits our natural freedom. In an earlier work, Discourse on Inequality, Rousseau described humans in their original state of nature. He believed they had two basic instincts: self-preservation, which he called amour de soi, love of self, and pity, a natural concern for others' suffering. Over time, as people began living in groups, they started comparing themselves to others. This led to the development of amour propre, or pride, which is a sense of self-worth, tied to how others see us. Rousseau argued that modern society is shaped by amour propre, making people competitive and jealous. which keeps them metaphorically in chains. At the start of The Social Contract, Rousseau looks at 3 traditional ideas about how societies are organized: natural authority, where rulers are like parents, the right of the strongest, and slavery. He rejects all of these, saying they are just excuses for existing inequalities, rather than fair systems. Instead, Rousseau argues that societies should be based on a mutual agreement, a social contract. This means that people come together and agree on rules to live by, creating a community that protects everyone's freedom and property equally. The key question for Rousseau is this: how can people join a society, follow its rules, and still remain free? His answer is that everyone should give up their individual rights to the community as a whole. This way, no one has more power than anyone else, and the rules are fair for everyone. For Rousseau, the community isn't just a group of people. It's an abstract idea, created by individuals who agree to work together for the common good. Rousseau's most famous concept is the general will, the collective will of the people, which represents what is best for the community. He believed that the general will, not a king or parliament, should be the ultimate authority. In small, equal communities, people's natural concern for others, amour de soi and pity, would guide their actions, while the harmful effects of amour propre would disappear. He wasn't talking about making everyone economically equal, but about equality in citizenship and direct democracy, where everyone has a say in decision-making. Rousseau argued that giving up some personal freedoms in the state of nature allows people to gain greater civil freedom in a fair society. He famously said that people who refuse to follow the general will might need to be forced to be free, meaning they need to act in the interest of the community, which is rationally best for them. For this system to work, Rousseau believed in small, homogeneous communities where direct participation was possible and where groups with competing interests wouldn't disrupt the process. In the end, whether you agree with Rousseau depends on whether you accept his ideas about human nature, particularly the role of pity and self-interest. Critics have accused Rousseau of promoting ideas that could lead to totalitarianism because of his focus on unity and shared values. This put him at odds with other Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Montesquieu, who emphasized individual rights. Despite this, Rousseau's influence on philosophy, politics, and psychology has been profound. His ideas helped shape the Enlightenment and the French Revolution and have impacted countless thinkers since. What if the life you're living, the beliefs you fiercely guard, the roles you play, are nothing more than illusions? What if your routines, your goals, your sense of purpose aren't signs of freedom, but the carefully polished bars of a prison you've been trained not to see? This is the kind of question Kafka doesn't just ask. He embodies. His works aren't simply stories, they're mirrors, strange and distorted, but painfully accurate reflections of our deepest fears about the self and the systems that surround us. Kafka isn't here to comfort you. He's here to disturb you, to show you how we lose our way in the labyrinth of rules and expectations we don't even remember agreeing to. Look at the metamorphosis. A man wakes up as a monstrous insect, and instead of screaming, he worries about being late for work. It's absurd, yes, but also uncomfortably familiar. Kafka exposes something fundamental about us. We are so entangled in our obligations that we willingly trade our humanity for a false sense of security. Gregor Samsa's grotesque form is not the horror. His surrender is. He doesn't rebel, doesn't cry out. Instead, he quietly lets go of his identity, piece by piece, in service of a system that has no real care for him. And so, Kafka asks, how much of yourself have you already given away? How many of your dreams, your joys, have you sacrificed to meet expectations you didn't set? Are you too becoming Gregor, slowly giving up your essence to please a merciless, faceless world? But Kafka's critique doesn't stop at individual surrender. It drills deeper into the systems we create. In the trial, Joseph K. is arrested for a crime that is never explained. He's thrown into a nonsensical bureaucracy where every door is closed, every rule meaningless, and yet he complies. Why? Because it's what we do. We follow absurd rules because we are afraid not to. We tell ourselves there must be a purpose, a reason, even when there is none. This is the heart of Kafka's message. The systems that bind us are illusions, but we enforce them upon ourselves. We live as though these structures are inevitable, unshakable, even sacred, because the alternative, freedom, terrifies us. Freedom means uncertainty. It means confronting the void and creating meaning from it. That, Kafka suggests, is the hardest thing of all. Kafka's world, as bleak as it appears, holds a faint but vital thread of hope. His characters show us the cost of avoiding truth, yes, but they also nudge us toward an alternative, to see life for what it is. Absurd, chaotic, and without inherent meaning, and to embrace it anyway. This is not despair. It's liberation. For once you realize the rules are made up, you are free to rewrite them. Once you see that the structures have no foundation, you can walk away. Kafka lived this tension. He wrestled with it in his work, in his relationships, in his life. He felt the weight of his father's expectations, the demands of society, the grind of a bureaucratic job, and he knew the courage it takes to step back and ask, is this really who I am? He understood that freedom isn't found in rebellion for its own sake or in destruction, but in honesty, in facing the illusions and choosing, with eyes wide open, to live authentically. So, here's the question Kafka leaves us with. Are you awake? Are you living your life, or the life others have handed to you? Are you clinging to comforting illusions at the cost of your own identity? True freedom, Kafka suggests, isn't just about breaking rules, it's about stepping outside the entire game and seeing it for what it is. It's about accepting the chaos, the absurdity, and finding your own meaning within it. Are you ready to wake up, to let go of the false comforts and embrace the terrifying, exhilarating truth of being fully, truly alive? Published in 1942, The Stranger by Albert Camus is one of the most iconic novels of existential literature. It tells the story of Meursault, a Frenchman living in Algeria whose life revolves around three pivotal deaths: his mother's passing, the murder of an Arab man, and his own execution. Each of these moments forces him to confront a deeper awareness of life, death, and his place in the world. Meursault is not your typical protagonist. When his mother dies, he doesn't react in a way society expects. At her funeral, he feels the heat of the sun more acutely than any sadness. He doesn't cry or express grief, instead observing his surroundings with detachment. This indifference becomes a defining trait, one that society will later judge harshly. Life goes on. Meursault spends his days enjoying the company of Marie, his girlfriend, without much emotional commitment. When she asks if he wants to marry her, he replies indifferently, essentially saying, "If it makes you happy." His attitude to life is strikingly casual. He drifts, responding to immediate experiences without overthinking them. He doesn't dwell on the past or worry about the future, he simply exists in the moment. This carefree demeanor leads him into morally ambiguous territory when he helps his neighbor Raymond, a shady character, take revenge on a woman who allegedly wronged him. Without much thought, Meursault supports Raymond's dubious actions, showing how little he questions the impact of his decisions. Everything changes one fateful day at the beach. After an altercation between Raymond and the brother of the woman he wronged, Meursault encounters the Arab man again. Overwhelmed by the blazing sun and an inexplicable impulse, Meursault shoots him, not just once, but 5 times. When asked why, his explanation is bizarrely simple. The sun was too hot. This senseless act of violence lands him in prison, but his trial turns out to be about much more than the murder itself. In court, Meursault's lack of emotion at his mother's funeral becomes a bigger crime in the eyes of society. The prosecutor paints him as a cold, heartless man, not because of the murder, but because he didn't conform to societal expectations of grief. The Arab man's death, though tragic, seems secondary to the courtroom's obsession with Meursault's indifference. Camus subtly critiques the legal and societal system, showing how it punishes those who don't fit the mold of what is considered normal. As Meursault awaits his execution, he undergoes a profound transformation. Facing death, he begins to reflect deeply on life. He rejects the offer of a priest, refusing to cling to religion for comfort. Instead, he confronts the reality of death with clarity. In his final moments, he finds freedom in accepting life's absurdity, the realization that life has no inherent meaning and that death is inevitable. This awareness doesn't depress him, it liberates him. For the first time, Meursault feels connected to the world and at peace with his fate. He even embraces the idea of the crowd's hatred during his execution, seeing it as a way to feel less alone in his final moments. At its core, The Stranger explores 2 profound themes: our awareness of death and society's obsession with guilt. Camus argues that death is the one certainty that unites all humans, and recognizing this fact can lead to a more authentic existence. Meursault's journey reflects this. While he begins as a detached and indifferent man, the inevitability of death awakens him to the beauty and fragility of life. The second theme, guilt, is equally powerful. Meursault is not just on trial for murder, but for failing to meet societal expectations. His inability to cry at his mother's funeral becomes symbolic of his emotional detachment, a trait society deems unacceptable. Camus critiques this tendency to force conformity, showing how modernity often punishes individuals not with physical pain, but with psychological pressure to feel guilt and behave in certain ways. This is especially relevant today, as societal norms around emotions, particularly for men, continue to evolve. Meursault's refusal to fake emotions or conform to expectations makes him dangerous in the eyes of others. Ultimately, The Stranger is a profound meditation on life, death, and what it means to be human. Through Meursault's indifference, Camus challenges readers to question societal norms and consider the freedom that comes with accepting life's absurdity. By the end of the novel, Meursault is no longer a stranger to himself or to existence. In embracing the inevitability of death, he discovers a connection to the world that finally brings him peace. Observing the contours of a woman's physique reveals that she is not designed for extensive mental or physical labor. Rather than through action, she fulfills her life's obligation through endurance, enduring the trials of childbirth, caring for children, and submitting to the authority of man, her companion. She is not assigned the greatest triumphs or tribulations. Her existence should flow more peacefully and unobtrusively than man's, without necessarily experiencing greater happiness or sorrow. Women are naturally suited to nurture and educate young children, because they themselves retain a childlike nature throughout their lives, existing in a state somewhere between childhood and adulthood. Their youthful vigor and charm, bestowed upon them for a limited time by nature, captivate men's imaginations and lead them into long-term commitments that may not otherwise seem justified. Nature has equipped women, like all creatures, with the means necessary for their survival, and only for the duration required, economizing resources. Just as the female ant sheds her wings after mating, rendering them unnecessary and even detrimental, so too does a woman often lose her youthful beauty after bearing children, for similar reasons. Young girls often view domestic or personal matters as secondary concerns, prioritizing love, conquests, and the activities associated with them. The maturity of women's reasoning faculties typically arrives earlier, but remains limited, rendering them perpetually childlike, tethered to the present moment, and often overlooking the broader context. Due to their weaker capacity for reason, women exhibit greater sympathy for the unfortunate, but may lack in matters of justice, honesty, and conscientiousness. Their reasoning tends to be myopic, focusing on immediate concerns rather than abstract concepts or future consequences, which sometimes leads to frivolity or extravagance. Women's innate capacity for dissimulation, inherited for self-protection in a world where physical strength is not their forte, manifests as a tendency to lie when necessary. Dissimulation becomes a natural tool for navigating their social and personal relationships, deeply ingrained in their character. The primary fault in women's character, arising from their limited reasoning abilities, is their lack of a sense of justice. This deficiency stems from their weak reasoning and reflection skills, and their biological predisposition to rely on cunning rather than strength. Nature's primary directive for women is the propagation of the human race, a duty they take seriously, prioritizing the species over individual concerns. This sense of duty, though subconscious, shapes their actions and decisions, often diverging from societal expectations. Women's frivolousness, their tendency toward indirect mastery through men, and their limited capacity for genuine interest in arts and culture reflect their inherent nature. Distinct from that of men, their pursuits often revolve around pleasing men and securing their favor, rather than genuine engagement with artistic or intellectual endeavors. So, basically, women's roles in society should align with their natural inclinations and capabilities, recognizing their inherent differences from men, and avoiding the imposition of unnatural expectations or privileges upon them. Only by acknowledging and respecting these differences can harmony and balance be achieved between the sexes. People generally work too much to be themselves. Work is a curse, and man has turned this curse into a pleasure. To work with all your might just for the sake of working, to find joy in an effort that leads only to irrelevant achievements, to imagine how much you can accomplish only through continuous and impersonal labor. This is what is revolting and incomprehensible. Sustained, relentless work dulls the mind, trivializes, and dehumanizes. The fact that every person must have a career, must fit into a way of life that almost never suits them, is an expression of this tendency to numb the mind through work. To work in order to live is a burden for humans, more painful even than for animals. To awaken the modern world to life, we must write an ode to idleness, to that idleness full of peace and a smile that accepts everything. We often assume that people are paying attention to our every move, analyzing our mistakes and judging our flaws. For example, you might believe that the stranger who saw you mess up a dance move, or the person who noticed your acne breakout, is still thinking about it. But here's the truth, they've probably already forgotten. They're too wrapped up in their own lives, just like you are. The embarrassing moments that haunt you are only remembered by you, and everyone else has already moved on. We are all the protagonists of our own stories, meaning we are naturally focused on ourselves. This tendency to be self-centered leads us to believe that others are just as invested in our lives as we are, but they're not. People are generally too caught up in their own worries and insecurities to care about what you're doing. Whether you trip in public or wear mismatched socks, it's a blip on someone else's radar, if they notice at all. Think about it. Do you remember the face of the person who slipped up in the gym, or what the cashier looked like at the supermarket last week? Probably not. You don't recall the little mistakes strangers make, and they don't remember yours either. This realization is freeing, because it shows that most of the moments you feel embarrassed about are insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Even the people closest to us, the ones who truly care about us, only think about us briefly throughout the day. Everyone is living their own life, and your every action doesn't hold the weight you think it does. In fact, nearly everything we do is forgotten shortly after it happens. This should encourage us to stop overthinking and start living authentically. If nobody really cares about your small mistakes or awkward moments, why let the fear of judgment hold you back from living the life you want? Often, we don't pursue our dreams or try new things because we're afraid of what others might think. But if most people won't even remember that you slipped up or embarrassed yourself, then their opinions are irrelevant. This is where the idea of being unapologetically yourself comes into play. You should feel free to express yourself and live how you want, knowing that most people are too caught up in their own lives to notice. Yes, some people will judge you. Yes, some people will doubt you. But those opinions are fleeting, and in the end, they don't affect your life. The best way to kill a big dream is to share it with someone who has a small mind. Some people will always doubt your abilities, and their judgment can make you second-guess yourself. But if you let that stop you, you're only holding yourself back. You don't need permission from others to chase your dreams. If there's one thing this idea teaches us, it's that we can do anything. We just need to start. The fear of judgment is often the only thing standing between us and our goals. But if you recognize that most people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are, you can let go of that fear. Life is too short to be lived in the shadow of others' opinions, especially when those opinions are fleeting and often non-existent. George Orwell's 1984 is a powerful novel set in a bleak dystopian world where the government controls every aspect of life. Published in 1949, the story paints a chilling picture of a society dominated by surveillance, propaganda, and the suppression of free thought. At its heart, 1984 is about the fight for individuality and truth in a world bent on crushing both. The novel follows Winston Smith, a middle-aged man living in Airstrip 1, formerly London, a province of a totalitarian state called Oceania. The party, led by the mysterious Big Brother, rules with absolute power. Through constant surveillance and ruthless enforcement, the party controls not only what people do, but also what they think. Big Brother is watching you is a recurring slogan that reflects the inescapable monitoring of citizens by telescreens and secret police. Winston works at the Ministry of Truth, where his job is to rewrite history to match the party's ever-changing version of events. For example, if the party decides they've always been at war with East Asia, Winston must erase any record showing otherwise. This manipulation of truth deeply troubles him, and he secretly rebels by starting a diary, a dangerous act, as even thoughts against the party are considered thought crimes. As Winston writes in his diary, "Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 makes 4. Winston's rebellion takes a risky turn when he meets Julia, a young woman who works in the fiction department. Though Winston initially distrusts her, Julia slips him a note that says, "I love you." The two begin a secret relationship, meeting in hidden places like a rented room above a second-hand shop. This room, owned by an apparently kind shopkeeper named Mr. Charrington, becomes their refuge from the party's prying eyes. Their relationship is not just about love, it's an act of defiance. As Julia explains, the party seeks power entirely for its own sake. It is not interested in the good of others, it is interested solely in power. Believing they might be part of a larger resistance, Winston and Julia try to join a group called the Brotherhood, which they've heard is working to overthrow the party. They are introduced to O'Brien, a high-ranking party member who pretends to share their rebellious spirit. O'Brien gives Winston a book that explains how the party maintains control through lies, fear, and manipulation. The book states, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." But Winston and Julia's rebellion is doomed. Mr. Charrington, the shopkeeper, is actually a member of the Thought Police, and their safe room was a trap all along. They are arrested and taken to the Ministry of Love, where they are separated and subjected to brutal torture. O'Brien, who is never a rebel, oversees Winston's torment. He tells Winston, "Power is in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them together again in new shapes of your own choosing." The most harrowing moment comes when O'Brien subjects Winston to his greatest fear, rats. Trapped and broken, Winston screams, "Do it to Julia, not me." This betrayal marks the end of his resistance. He is released back into society, but he is no longer the same. In the novel's tragic conclusion, Winston meets Julia again, but they are both hollow, having betrayed each other under torture. They no longer feel love or connection. Winston has been completely brainwashed. The final line of the book reveals his ultimate surrender. He loved Big Brother. Key scenes, like Winston's secret diary, his first meeting with Julia, the betrayal in the rented room, and his breaking point in the Ministry of Love, show the terrifying power of the party. Orwell's use of slogans like "war is peace," "freedom is slavery," "ignorance is strength," highlights how language and truth can be twisted to control people. The party's goal is absolute, to make individuals incapable of independent thought. 1984 is a warning about the dangers of totalitarianism, propaganda, and the loss of personal freedom. Orwell's vision of a world where truth is erased and minds are controlled remains hauntingly relevant. reminding us to guard against oppression and to value truth, even when it's inconvenient or dangerous.